It's like, how? Why would my brain do this to me? Why would this not be real physical damage in my body? And actually, if it's your brain generating your symptoms, you've got all this hope, there's all this ability to change things.
I've heard so many recovery stories that started for people in childhood, but my guest today got sick at just 11 years old and lived with chronic pain, ME/CFS, and POTS for 25 years. I don't know if her story breaks my heart more from sadness or if it just breaks it wide open with hope. Because if someone who spent most of her life not knowing what it like to be well can fully recover, like that's not just hope anymore. That is proof. If you're new here, I'm Raelan Agle, and I share conversations with people from around the world who've resolved chronic conditions like ME/CFS and long COVID. No fluff, no gatekeeping, just what actually helps. And today I'm speaking with Fiona Symington, joining us from Oxford in the UK. Her symptoms were complex and terrifying and dismissed again and again by the medical system. But after discovering a science-backed approach to rewiring chronic pain and fatigue, it actually jumped out at her in an Instagram ad. She finally found the cure that she needed. Now, 6 years into her full recovery, bursting with energy, she's starting her training to become a clinical psychologist at Oxford and using her story to speak up for those who are still suffering. So let's dive in. Fiona, oh, so excited to have you here. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so excited to do this. And my dog's joining in as well. So,
That is perfect. An adorable co host. Okay, so you've got the task of all tasks right now. It's always challenging for people to try and sum up
yeah.
their health journey, but yours has gone back so far along.
Mhm.
So, no pressure. But if you could figure out, I don't know where to start, but how did this start for you? And what did your health journey look like?
So I was 11 years old. I fell off a horse in a riding lesson actually when I was 10. And it's one of those funny things in that I mean, I was knocked unconscious. It was not a fun fall. It was not something that I would want to go through again, but I didn't come away injured. I came away, I was walking, I was okay. But that in my mind was always the starting point in that I started developing pain on and off. And when you're that age and you, or I think any age and you're in pain, you're always going to be looking back to say, well, what maybe started it? And it felt like the fall from the horse was it. It then went away. But I woke up one day and it didn't go away. And over the course of a week, it really got quite a lot worse to the point where I was in tears. I was struggling with going to school. I think my mum ended up going and getting some crutches for me because I really was struggling with walking. That was the beginning of 25 years of problems. And I had pain in my knee and I had pain in my hip and then I had pain in my spine. And then I went forward, I went through all sorts of different tests and scans and nothing showed anything up. And then as the years went on, I had pain in my neck and my rib cage and my elbows and my ankles, and it was different in different years. It became very severe pain very quickly, and I wasn't really able to go to school. I was lying in bed a lot. I was in and out of different hospital pain management programs. They very quickly sort of said, well, there's nothing wrong with you. So I'm sure a lot of people can relate. You attract these labels of, well, maybe she's making it up, maybe school's not going well and she's saying she's in pain. There was a sort of campaign, I guess, in different hospitals of don't talk to Fiona about the pain. I was not allowed to be asked how is the pain, in case that made me think about it and made me talk about it more. And it was in my early 20s that I, having had lots of disruption, lots of traumatic interventions, different things to try and help the pain, different sort of injections and procedures, which were horrible to go through growing up. I ended up at university. That was a really big deal for me. But these viruses I then couldn't shake off, and then also ended up with this diagnosis of ME/CFS as well. And years of, I had to drop out of university. I wasn't able to work. I had to watch my friends go off and get married and have children and start their careers. And, I had various attempts. I did a bit of volunteering for 1 year and tried different treatments, and always hoping that there would be a way out of these symptoms, which were so unbearable. I'm spending most of my life in bed and or on the sofa and not being able to take part in life, and yeah, very, very restricted. And that was 25 years of life, really.
My goodness. Well, first off, I don't even know the words to say how sorry I am that you had to go through all
Thank
of
you so
that. I
much.
can't even begin to imagine what you went through in all those years.
Oh, yeah.
And wow, what a great job you did summing up
Thank you.
decades.
A very quick snapshot, but it's sort of that's the basic overview. But yeah, ask anything, please.
I imagine it's a challenging thing to explain to people because the vast majority of people have never gone through anything like this,
Yeah.
starting from such a young age. Like I would imagine that you're met with a lot of sort of blank faces and just not sure what to say. Like
Yeah,
yeah, how do people respond
I
when you
think
try and tell them about your journey?
it's got easier. I used to find, I think when I was actually living with the symptoms and I was trying to say to people, if somebody said, "What school do you go to?" or later, what do you do for work? And I used to find that very, very difficult because I'd say I was in pain. They're interested, they want to know. And I never had a straightforward answer. I had a diagnosis of EDS from my very late teens. I had it for a brief period. There were sort of moments where I'd add in labels. So I had a diagnosis of POTS. There were different things. I actually had a diagnosis of interstitial cystitis at one point and complex regional pain syndrome. So I had these labels which people didn't understand that. And I think when you're actually going through pain, one of the things I desperately wanted was for people to understand how dreadful it was. And so I'm very lucky in that I'm far enough along in my recovery. I don't have to talk about it all the time. And it does come up. And then, it's amazing how often it comes up in some ways. But people are very kind. And I think the lovely thing is that I've found is that people really understand what's led to my recovery. I start talking a bit about that and they get it. They're like, oh, I had migraines and in a stressful period of my life, and then that got easier and they went away. And so people sort of understand more these days, and it's also painful when they don't get it. I wouldn't expect people to necessarily get it because how could you if you've not even sort of been in hospital, or maybe you've had a bit of pain after a broken leg or something, but it's just so difficult to understand that I don't worry so much. But it's lovely the moments where people, you get people say, well, oh, my sister's kind of had a similar story. And I just, wonder if the same kind of techniques that helped you could help her. It's just the best feeling where you can start to have conversations that end up helping people. But it's not easy. I do sort of, struggle at times with still just, it's very hard for people to relate to me in some ways, but it's also much easier than it ever was. Yeah. Having people understand at that point, I think.
So clearly you found things thankfully that eventually helped you to get past that, but
Mm.
I imagine, like, did you go down that road that so many of us do, trying all of these different sort of sometimes bizarre and out there
Yeah.
things, just like
Yeah.
for trying to find anything that would help?
I was taken. I think I had a very worried mum, and no one wants to see their child in pain. So certainly as a young teen, I was being taken here, there, and everywhere, which is that's difficult actually, and you end up seeing people that I would say were quacks and shouldn't have been treating people, and then lots and lots of different doctors. And I went through one particular period in my early 20s when the pain got so bad. I really couldn't cope with that. And so we were going to pain clinics where it was very invasive procedures, very traumatic. Actually, the pain just got worse, which didn't make any sense to me then. It does now. I understand now I was very frightened and I was feeling very invaded and very bombarded. I think that there was certainly a sense of giving up probably in my 20s. There was a sense of I am not going to get better and it's harming me to keep trying. That's a hard place to be, but it was also quite peaceful. But yeah, I think that particularly when I got the ME diagnosis, I very much kept an eye on, well, you know, people were saying to me in the ME community, well, we're so close to a breakthrough. We know there's something going wrong in our bodies. And if we can just hang on, there's a bit of research around the corner and we're so close. And that was the time that I did have some hope in the sense of, there's going to be some researchers out there. They give me this answer, and there's always this hope for a magic cure, which actually I really just thought that's not possible. But you do get sucked into following headlines and thinking, oh well, maybe this drug is going to come out, and I'm going to take it, and I'm going to get my life back. And it's a very hard place to be, and it's something a lot of people I know live with, and that absolute desperation of just you just want to go back to how good life was before you had the symptoms. I think.
Yeah, when you were 10. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was 10.
When I first, we connected and I read a bit about your story, I just thought it's so easy to lose hope and get
Mm.
burned out from this constant picking yourself back up and trying new things. But when it's been almost as long as you can remember, the first thing I thought was like, how do you even find that hope? I just imagine it would be even more challenging
Yeah.
when it's almost all you can remember.
It's so funny to look back because I really had so little hope. I really struggled. And actually, there's this little thing in my mind that makes me think I must have had some hope because when I recovered, we had my childhood bike in the shed, and this had traveled to different homes that, I'd lived in. And I don't think any of us could bear to get rid of it because I used to love just whizzing around on my bike, and I was always, I was active. I loved dancing and I loved swimming and I loved hiking. And so this bike sat there, and actually when I recovered, and I was very unfit and I had to build up my walking first, and my sense was just walk, leave everything else. But there came a point a few weeks in where I dug this bike out of the shed, and I cycled around the garden, and then I ended up building up to sort of I cycled down the road, and I sort of thought, well, how far can I go? Because I had very little strength. There was a sense of, is this recovery going to hold? Am I going to get a certain distance and then not be able to cycle back? So it was all very overwhelming, but it was really uncomfortable to cycle, and my knees were sort of sore, and I was thinking, oh goodness, is this actually, have I got problems still? And it was a 10-year-old's bike and I was an adult, and I didn't really, I didn't really think at the time, well, actually, this is a child's bike. But it was just my bike, it was just the thing that had sat in the shed. And it took me a little while to get rid of it. And I got an adult sized bike. But, then maybe was that some kind of hope that we didn't get rid of it? And because, I couldn't use that for years and years and years. It was so
Yeah.
far beyond me. But I mean, even daring, I think sort of embracing the program that led to my recovery, having a go at it, I do remember that sense of what happens if I actually allow myself to hope. I think most people with a chronic illness would say they would give anything to have their life back. And it's a really brave thing to take a step in that direction. And I remember finding that a big deal. And it's invisible, you're not, it's something that you're doing internally. People don't necessarily understand how hard it is. Yeah, just taking that step is a really, really big deal.
So eventually you did start to find something or
Mhm.
get onto a path to start feeling better. So how did that happen?
It's so funny to think about it even now because it was such a surreal thing to have gone through this. But I was on Instagram. My social life was in my phone. I had my Facebook friends in the ME community. They were such close friends to me, and I was on there every day talking to them. But I was scrolling and I saw this ad for Curable, and I looked at it the first time, and actually I just thought, well, this is a load of rubbish. It's always been really important to me to say. I wrote it off. I looked at it. I obviously felt sort of a pull to look at the website because deep down I was desperate, but looked at the website and thought, nope, that's not going to help me. And this ad kept coming back. What I remember seeing was testimonials from people saying, you might think this is rubbish, you might think this isn't going to help you, but please have a look at it because this has helped my pain or my fatigue or whatever. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I was living with my parents at the time. I sort of lived with them off and on in adult life because it was always very difficult to manage independently. And they were going off to Australia. I've got a sister living out there. So they had this 3-week holiday booked. And I remember thinking, I have to just have a bit of time to myself. And I don't want to tell anybody in case they just jump to conclusions that this is going to work. And then what if it doesn't? So I waited until I had the house to myself. I always sort of think I cleared my diary, but I didn't have anything in my diary. But I didn't sort of. I had things I used to do where I used to do bits of sewing and bits of writing, and I stopped doing all of that. And I sat on the sofa with this website, and I almost had this sense of, this is a load of rubbish. This is a con. This is just something that I need to do my absolute best at it so that I can prove to myself that in my mind it was like, well, my symptoms are not all in my head, and I'm going to show people that my symptoms are real because this is not going to work, and I'm going to do my best. And then actually, the joke was on me because I did my best, and I recovered. So it worked. It all worked. I was trying to prove that it was totally rubbish. And very quickly I was listening to the lessons in it and went, oh my goodness, this is the most incredible thing. And in some ways, what was being explained to me was, I think they tried on the pain management programs when I was a young teen to sort of to explain that, the brain can generate symptoms. And I'd never found it convincing. And it had always just told me that my doctors were maybe a bit stupid, actually, because they clearly didn't understand that I was really genuinely in terrible pain, and they must be missing something. So unfortunately, they didn't manage to explain things in the right way, but I got onto Curable and I just was hooked. And yeah, it was a matter of weeks. And I mean, I think it was 6 weeks later that I was just so sure I was well and I was going to be okay. And, for 25 years of symptoms and then to suddenly have that happen in a few weeks is, yeah, I will never stop thinking it's just such a miracle and such a strange thing to go through. But yeah, best thing that's ever happened to me.
Okay, so I want to hear about what exactly it was you're doing during those first few
Yeah.
weeks with Curable, just for people who aren't
Mm.
familiar with the app. But what I'm really excited here is when your parents came home
Yeah.
after a few weeks,
Yeah,
and then what you were significantly better.
well, and
How did
I
that
did,
go?
and in some ways, it's a bit of a. I'm not sure it's the most exciting part of the story because I messaged them, so I remember thinking I've really got to this can't be the biggest shock. They're going to come home, and I'm sort of saying surprise, I'm okay, and I also think there's something about explaining this kind of recovery that's hard because you don't want people to say, well, hang on, were you actually making it up? How are you better? So I wrote them an email before they flew and I said, look, I just need to tell you that I came across this website. I explained the basic science behind it in terms of, the brain we know that it can generate symptoms. It can do so when maybe you've had trauma as a child, maybe when you're a bit more of a perfectionist and a sensitive person. And I've been learning these exercises which are about calming the nervous system down. And at that point, it wasn't I'm completely well and life's all going to be great from here. It was, I've been trying these exercises. They're working. I don't want to make too much of a fuss. I've still got some work to do. I just need some space to think about it. So it was all quite low key when they came back. But the moment I think I remember getting a message, they landed in our local airport and I was on the local forest, in a place that they'd been driving to for years and having walks and texting me photos from it. But I was sitting on a bench in this local forest and deep down being like, oh, this is real. And so, yeah, there was no great, I mean, it's not like a lovely Hollywood movie. It would be nice if it was all so sort of big, but we had to be a little careful about it at that point, but it was amazing. And I've kept the text that I sent them and the photographs and the got the email where I'm trying to explain it all. And yeah.
So I mean, I've talked a lot about Curable on the channel here. I've used it myself. It's
Yeah.
helped me. It's where I've learned a lot of what I've learned, about neuroplasticity and brain retraining and
Mhm.
nervous system regulation.
Yeah.
But so what is it like, for you? What did it look like on a day-to-day basis working with Curable? How did that help you?
Yeah. So I think that's a really good question. And I think it's one of those things. I always say people need to find their own the program that works for them or the book that works for them. And this worked very well for me in that I would wake up and the sort of the educational and sort of the pain science, which I had to then think about. I was thinking if the brain can generate pain, then maybe it can also generate all these symptoms. There was very little, I think 6 years ago or 6.5 years ago, there wasn't, I couldn't sort of go out and find recovery stories about fatigue and ME and even all the long COVID stories actually. So I really had to sit and think about, okay, I'm going to tell myself that when they say pain in the lessons, I'm going to apply it to my fatigue. So I would go through one of the lessons and quite often I would then sit for a couple of hours and I would think and I would digest it. And bearing in mind my energy was very low and I wasn't doing a lot anyway. So my days were very sedentary. But I would do a couple of the meditations a day. I was very cynical about those. I tried meditating, it had done nothing for me. So I particularly went into those thinking, well, I can't see how that's going to help physical symptoms. That was a big leap for me. But I did them because I was on this mission to prove that it was all stupid and wrong. So I think they were very good at saying, do the journaling even if you don't think it's going to work for you. And so I did take that seriously. I didn't want to push it too much. I always, if people ask me for advice, I say, don't go mad with it. For some people, it's the first time they've really tried it and got in touch with their feelings or maybe some of the memories. So I only did that a couple of times a week, but that was amazing. I thought I was very in touch with my feelings. Probably somebody I would say I have high emotional intelligence, But actually, what a revelation that actually sitting down and writing about your feelings it shifts things and it changes things. I found myself lying in bed at night or lying in the bath and just, the more I got into it, thinking, oh my goodness, I want to soak this all up. So listening to the podcasts and yes, looking for some YouTube videos. There weren't lots 6.5 years ago, but looking for some and just to sort of really get through to my brain, the message that they were trying to give me.
That is absolutely incredible. What was it like to have these symptoms start to go away and start to be able to do more and more? Like,
It
what did that feel
it
like?
was oh, I don't even know how to describe it. I had a moment in a field. It was a couple of weeks probably that I went down this track behind my parents' house, and it was somewhere that I couldn't walk normally. It was very short track, but it was just there was the tiniest incline coming back, and it scared me because that would have made me crash, and so I didn't do that kind of thing. It was a moment where was sort of like, okay, I'm ready to start to push myself a little bit, which if you have ME, you don't push yourself, you learn not to, because the symptoms are so awful, the crashes can be so awful. I'd had ME for 14 years. I did not do things that got my heart rate up. Life was very small, and I was very careful about things, and I had to be. But I went down this track and I realized for me that in those early days, it was going to be important to kind of stop and rerun certain things in my head and certain exercises. And I had this moment of panic where I started to feel tired, and I had to stand still with my eyes shut in on this track surrounded by farmland, which occasionally there were other dog walkers around in that area, and I used to be able to see them from my bedroom window. So I was like, okay, hope nobody's going to turn up. But I had to sort of almost work out some strategies for myself. And in that moment, it was picturing myself roller skating and smiling and looking really happy, and then probably doing some breathing and going over some of the things I'd been taught. And the symptoms did just go instantly in that moment. And I walked back up this incline towards the hill, and I very much used visualization. And for me, it was picturing myself on a bike and having this like bright red lipstick on and looking really well. And it's the kind of thing that, before I knew all of these techniques, if you'd have said to me that this was going to help me, I would have been so insulted. I would have said, how can picturing something like this change anything? And I think it's really important to say that, all the exercises together, all the different bits of work you do, and then you're adding in something like visualization. For me, it's not just if somebody's very unwell and they start to picture themselves being well that they're going to miraculously get up and be okay. It's a series of steps that I needed to take. But I learned that visualization is so powerful.
Yeah, that is absolutely incredible. I always say, what would you go back and tell yourself if you could reach back in time? And for you, it would be to 11-year-old
Oh,
Fiona.
goodness
What
me.
would you tell her about all that was to
Yeah.
come?
I mean, 11-year-old Fiona ended up going through some absolutely horrible, awful things in hospitals. I was treated very badly. And if I could give myself anything I would like to take away, now I know that my symptoms, I had these techniques which essentially switched them off. I would like to be able to give all of that knowledge because I'd like to spare myself what I went through. It was dreadful. But my interactions with doctors and nurses and physios and occupational therapists, they were very scary. At the time, I think doctors didn't do these kind of symptoms well. I think sometimes it's still not great care. I think a lot of people have experience of being told, well, it's all in your head, or, you're just stressed, or you're exaggerating. And there's a lot of fear, and I was very frightened. I think, even just my first few medical encounters, I felt belittled and I felt not listened to. And that's horrible for any human being. But when you're in pain and you're in pain, your symptoms are real, that's dreadful. And I would say to 11-year-old me, actually, as scary as this is, and as much as it might not make sense, please listen to this message that the brain can generate symptoms. And it's such a big thing to get your head around. I think so many people,
Hmm.
it's like, why would my brain do this to me? Why would this not be real physical damage in my body. But we know that it can. And I think that once you start to really open your mind to that reality, there are techniques that help, there are tools that help, and it's such an amazing, I mean, I'm fascinated by the brain now. I just think it's the most extraordinary thing, and I just love learning about it. Brains are just so incredible, but obviously get things wrong as well. And I think that when I realized, because there I was desperate for answers, so desperate. I would have given anything. I used to be particularly desperate for somebody to open me up and look at my spine because they couldn't see a problem on the x-rays. So it's like, if they can open me up, they'll see that I'm not making this up. They'll see there's something wrong. And actually, if there had been something seriously wrong with my spine, I wouldn't be as well and healthy as I am now. And I have the best life. I was out paddleboarding yesterday. I hike, I go to dance classes. I've tried snowshoeing and skiing, and I've been up in a hot air balloon, and I've done all these absolutely brilliant things. And if it's your brain generating your symptoms, you've got all this hope, there's all this ability to change things. And if there's something very seriously wrong with structurally, you don't necessarily have that freedom. And so I think having an open mind, even if you've been very hurt and you're very confused and you might be scared, it's worth doing it. There's just so much that you can do if it's your brain that's generating the symptoms.
Yeah, it really is a hopeful message, as perplexing as it is. And I know, there are parts of our brain that care about, our happiness and love and connection, but the parts of our brain that are keeping us alive, that are worried about, their purpose is survival,
Yeah,
and that generate these symptoms as alarms, that part of your brain doesn't care if you're happy or
yeah,
thriving. It cares that you're alive. And
yeah.
if it's still detecting some sort of danger, whether emotional or physical, or it's just a miscommunication, it's going to keep giving those symptoms. So it is a hard thing. Like, why on earth? It feels like
Mm,
your brain's working against you, but it really is on your side. It's just
yeah,
one piece of what's running the
absolutely.
show, and that piece is just hyper focused on survival.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's a tough thing. It's a
yeah,
tough thing to so to speak wrap your head around.
yeah. Yeah, it really is, and it's still, I still have my moments where I think, how is this real? How is this actually what happened? That I had these symptoms for so long, and I'm completely fine. And it is very perplexing, but it helps now that I've got lots of friends who they've been on this journey, they've been through the same thing. That makes it easier to get my head around it, I think.
And it's so incredible to see the life that you're living now. And I know we talked about this before we started recording, but I interviewed Louise McAllen
Mhm.
before, and I can link her interview up here. But the two of you now, tell us a bit about that.
Louise is wonderful. Please watch her video if you haven't already. It's beautiful. She is a beautiful human being. I love her very much. Louise was somebody that I knew in the ME community. So we were in a creative Facebook group together. And when I recovered, my first sense really was, well, I've got to tell people about this. I know so many people who are struggling, and I want them to be well. And I knew that some people would not want to explore the whole idea of brain retraining because it's really hard, and it's a big leap. And I put a message up on my Facebook saying, I've actually recovered, and I tried to do an explanation of it that wouldn't be too strange and threatening and might make people curious. And Louise was really the first person to say, oh, I'm going to try it. And she was so brave, and I'm so grateful. And I will always be grateful that she stepped up and said yes, because it does really take a huge amount of courage. And we talked on and off for a few weeks, and I just sat there thinking, please, can this work for her as well? Anyway, I remember getting this message from her, and basically it was working. And then watched her have this beautiful recovery. And we've had this wonderful friendship ever since. And we've had lots of, recovery is the best thing ever, but there's also low points for both of us because it's a big change, and that's stressful. And also, what do you do? I mean, when you recover, what are you supposed to do? Who are you supposed to go to and say, well, help? What I had to rebuild everything. I hadn't worked, and I had got a degree that I'd done very slowly from home, but I didn't have a CV. I wasn't living independently at that point. Didn't have friends really outside of the sort of illness communities that I was part of. So Louise and I, we sort of really supported each other through this patch, and have ended up going on some lovely holidays together, which are very special memories. We've got another one booked in a few weeks' time. We're going to go and have some quality time together, and I've watched her help so many people recover. She does beautiful work, and I've met some of her friends that she's helped recover, and then she's met some of the other people that I've been involved with supporting. It's just this whole network now of people, and it's just lovely. It's just the best thing. So, yeah.
That is absolutely incredible. I'll definitely make sure to get her video
Yeah,
linked up
yeah,
for
please
people to
do.
check out. It's a really beautiful one as well. And I do, if anyone's interested in checking out Curable, I do have an affiliate link for it, things that I promote. I'm like, if I'm going to talk about it all the time, I might as well get an affiliate link. But the good news for people watching is it gets you 6 weeks for free. So there's a link in the video description if you haven't tried it and you want to check it out. And the good thing is that I've noticed things like Curable, a lot of these things that were geared 100% towards pain are very much expanding their scope
Very much.
and their vocabulary.
Yeah.
And they now talk about pain and many other symptoms. And they talk about ME/CFS, they talk about long COVID. So for a long time, yes, we were trying to fit ourselves into this
Yeah.
chronic pain box and just replace the words in our head and
Yeah.
just trust that it was somehow applied to us too.
Hmm.
But the science is changing every day, every week. Like I
Yeah.
interviewed a doctor recently, Dr. Andrea Furlan, and she says, I do this full time and I
Hmm.
can't keep up with the science. It's changing so fast.
Yeah.
So, which is really
It's
exciting.
so
So, yes,
exciting.
we've been piggybacking chronic pain science for a while,
Hmm.
and it really truly does apply to so many cases of
Yeah.
ME/CFS and long COVID. So, I'm so glad that you stubbornly sought out to prove them wrong. Testament that you don't even have to believe in it. You're like,
Yeah.
not only am I skeptical, I'm going to show you this does not work.
Yeah, I'm very stubborn, and I just think now, thank goodness that I was stubborn about this. And I do get people say sometimes they dip their toe into it, and then they come back and say, "Well, it doesn't work." And I try to do it with a positive attitude, and it doesn't work. It really isn't about just being, really relentlessly positive and ignoring any negative feelings. That's not what brain retraining is. And it's okay if you're skeptical. It's okay if you're scared. It's fine. It's human to have that reaction. This is such a big shift for most people to look at. So yeah, please don't be put off by that if you are feeling nervous and unsure if it applies to you, I think.
Yeah, I just really hope people will stay curious and hate watch if you
Yeah.
must, but you might find yourself like Fiona being converted. And that's a win-win. Your worst case scenario is that, oh my goodness, it actually works for me too. Yeah, I think we all go through that journey because it's been such a rapid different dramatic way of thinking about things that none of us and most of our doctors, we can't have this conversation with them because
Yeah.
they're not up to speed on this because
Yeah.
they can't be read up on every single piece of medical literature out there. So yeah,
Yeah.
just be gentle with yourself if you're skeptical or if you try it and it does work and you were resistant to it, because so many of us, I think that's the normal part of the journey. Thank you so much, Fiona, for being here. I'm so excited for you that you're here and doing so well. My heart breaks for all that you've gone through, but wow, to see the life you're living now and sharing your story, I'm sure will mean so much to so many people and give hope to people who have been unwell for many years and understandably are feeling like there's no hope. So, Fiona, if you can get past this, I believe anybody can. So thanks for being here and sharing your story. I really
Thank you
appreciate it.
so much. Well, it's been a pleasure. It's been lovely to talk to you.
And thank you to everyone who's watching. And I hope you'll stick around and check out this next video with Louise.